Okay, good evening and welcome to the Boys Club podcast. Tonight we are talking about fascism and aesthetics. I would love to welcome Janet. Janet, how was your evening?
It's going good. It's going good. I'm all pumped to talk about fascism. Yay.
And we have Comrade Crazy. How are you?
Hi guys, I'm doing great, doing good. Can't wait to also talk about fascism.
And of course, last but not least, we have Nico. Nico, how's your evening?
It's going well. I'm going to change it up. I'm really excited to talk about aesthetics and not so much about fascism.
Okay, I'll give you that.
Absolutely. So, we're going to be talking a lot about fashion and food and music and all of the things around us that we consume every single day and their ties to the alt-right pipeline and fascism. So pipelines work really well because they are hidden in plain sight. Every niche, every interest, every hobby has the potential to be turned into an alt-right pipeline. So things that are even seem as innocent as maybe a cooking channel could be an alt-right pipeline. Like for instance, if this cooking channel the person who is running it is always dressed like it's the 1950s. They are emphasizing that they are feeding their husband. You have now found your way into an alt-right pipeline. And that's what makes it so successful because what they do is they put little dog whistles into what appears to be regular content, which goes to further and further and further radicalize people. And the dog whistles are always changing. So, what might seem to be just someone enjoying to dress like it's the 1950s may actually be part of a narrative. It is a signal. It signals to white supremacists that they want to return to a time where there was segregation, where there was emphasis on nuclear family, the Jim Crow laws, and all of these things do add up. So aesthetics are never on accident. These are choices that people make to signal to other people, just like we can signal positive things to other people, like saying maybe we wear like a peace sign or something on our shirt. We can also signal things that are much more insidious and negative. Everything about the way that you show up in the world is political, from your choice of clothing to the music that you listen to, the media that you consume in general. These are all identifiers of who you are. And while maybe, say, for instance, a particular genre of music is not inherently fascistic or white supremacist, any niche or interest can be turned into that. Because the goal of the pipeline is for it to further the radicalization further and further and further into the alt-right. And then eventually there is no more dog whistle. As most of us are seeing today, we are seeing that it is becoming more and more overt and more mainstream, and there are less dog whistles, and people are just outright coming out with and saying what it is that they believe. And that's what we're here to discuss today, is all the different ways that we're seeing this manifest and in what niches, or lifestyle content or music or really anything around you in your life. It touches everything. Anything can lead you down a pipeline. But today we want to focus on aesthetics because that can be a little bit more covert. So we would like to bring attention to that. And I know that Lumpy has prepared something for us if we're ready to go to Lumpy.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm ready. So I grew up, I talk about this a lot. I was born in 1970, so I grew up and I went into the punk. Like punk spoke to me because, like, you know, screw authority, you know, and like that was like, yeah, that was how we were feeling at the time when, everything was like this big change and everything that was happening. So it's the mid 70s, and there's an economic recession going on, in particular in the US and UK. There was high unemployment among the younger working class and inflation during another recession brought on by capitalism's instability. The post war dream of middle class utopia was dead. Well, at least for some of the people who thought they were slated for it, i.e., those white people who teeter on the fence of poor and middle class, hoping they make it without incident to their next paycheck. It is in this that punk rock was born, the child of yet another devastating disappointment in capitalism, and the angry music of the youth from the past couple of decades, like the 50s rock and roll and rockabilly, and the 60s garage bands, and the proto-punk glam bands of the early 70s. In England, this attracted the anarchists, and in New York, the artists, and it was messy because the culture around it was anger towards anything authoritative. And that left it open for co-option from the far-right elements. The push to go against anything considered normal and boring brought in the thought that using aesthetics that will shock and awe was a good thing. So you get Sid Vicious from the Sex Pistols wearing a swastika and people claiming he's just doing it for shock value. And fashion designers like Vivienne Westwood, who claimed they used the symbol as a critique against fascism. I'm going to bring up the Nazi skinheads as a co-option of the aesthetics of the 60s skinheads that consisted of the Jamaican rude boys and the white working class youth, and was maybe not wholly defined as like an anti-racist community, but it consisted of black and white youths. So it was along more of a class lines thing. In the 70s, the neo-Nazi movements coming into the punk scene co-opted the aesthetics of the skinheads. This was met with the formation of sharp skinheads against racial prejudice, who were taking back the aesthetics. Lace culture started up in the 80s, though I didn't really see much of that here in the East Coast of the United States until later, like maybe late 90s, early 2000s. But this could tell you who someone was. So if someone came in with certain laces, they were a Nazi, and you could proceed as you would with a Nazi. So just making note of those couple of things, because despite the neo-Nazis' co-option, there were always the ones who fought against it and tried to keep communities safe from the right-wing elements like Sharp and like Rock Against Racism movements. But the huge lesson learned is there is nothing not political. If you are part of a growing trend or culture that is based on anti-establishment elements, you sure as hell need to be keeping that message on the establishment and not let it slide to the fascist elements just waiting there to twist the message and blaming anything and everything that just gives you an enemy made up of marginalized people. So Nazi symbolism made its way into the punk scene, and in the late 90s, early 2000s, there was the girly pop elements that hit it. This is where they started using a lot of lightning bolts, and we might get into that in a little bit. And I just got to say, I love those little girly pop skulls. So people knew I liked these skulls and started giving me gifts with the skulls on them. They range from those cute little girly pop ones with the little pink ribbons, they're so cute, and then to the Jolly Roger, which I'm down with that. And so I was good with that. So that's the Jolly Roger's more like the skull on top of a crossbones, right? And then one time, this woman that I worked with gave me a skull on a necklace that looked an awful lot like a Waffen SS skull, with the skull, the skull down on the crossbones, and it's a got a squish skull. And yeah, I was kind of like, yeah, I think I might be over the skull stuff at this point. I mean, I still have some of my skull stuff, but I threw that one away. I didn't really say anything to her about it. I probably should have, but I was just like, this is just weird. But she was older, and I don't know. I just let it go. So there is a Marxist. However, I need to disclose Walter Benjamin, who was a Marxist, comes from the Frankfurt School. So he hung around with leftoms and Trotskyists. Let's just say he was friends with Hannah Arendt. But he himself had his own particular strain of thinking, adding in some Jewish mysticism. So I just want to put that out there. But he did speak on the use of aesthetics in fascism. In fact, that fascism brought aesthetics into the political life. And the purpose of that is to give something to the working class to be dazzled by instead of them worrying about the capitalists who are actually making them struggle. He stated, fascism attempts to organize the newly created proletarian masses without affecting the property structure which the masses strive to eliminate, the private property. Fascism sees its salvation in giving these masses not their right, but instead a chance to express themselves. The masses have a right to change property relations. Fascism seeks to give them an expression while preserving property. The logical result of fascism is the introduction of aesthetics into political life. And you see the big parades and the spectacles of patriotism serves this purpose. And we're going to be seeing a lot of that next year for our 250th anniversary. But in my lifetime, I saw punk go from this, F the establishment, unprincipled message of class consciousness, sort of, to this poppy kind of maybe the establishment isn't so bad, but I super really love the look. And I'm putting that maybe the establishment isn't so bad because the people I was last hanging out with that do, still play punk and stuff like that are just a bunch of liberals. They were all fine with voting for Democrats. So, but yes, that's what I put together on the punk rock stuff. But like with all, I brought up like rockabilly and stuff like that. So there's a lot in the music. And so I don't know, Nico, did you want to add to that? Because I know you have a lot of stuff to talk about on music too.
Yeah, so I guess both of us kind of have similar experiences, whereas like you were a punk, I have always been a goth for a very long time, since I was in middle school in a very real way. Of course, not everyone, I shouldn't assume, but a lot of people know goth kind of came from the punk scene, post-punk. Almost all goth is post-punk, but not all post-punk is goth, as they say. But I noticed for me, when, specifically talking about aesthetics, the boiling down of aesthetics for musical subgenres. And I think that affects punk very strongly, like you mentioned, as punk progressed. But I see that more so or very blatantly when it comes to the goth subculture. It's one of those things where these days, if you say that goth is based on the music you listen to, which goth, since it also came from the, punk subgenre, it's one of those things that's, anti-authoritarian in a very real sense. It focuses on the darker aspects, but, it's based off of romanticism. It's about finding hopeful things in dark times, even though people just think it's dark. And there was a strong culture surrounding the goth scene. It was welcoming and opening to suburban kids, but also poor kids and people who came from different backgrounds, because people were interested in learning about people's cultures and where you could find almost like this romanticization of like these hard struggles that people go through. It's always been a left wing subculture. But the issue is and I'm kind of rambling, I'm sorry, is the fact that people have kind of lost that. It's just about the aesthetics. If you go, oh, I listen to goth music, that's what makes you goth. You get someone who turns around and goes, just because I don't listen to goth music doesn't mean I'm not goth. Look at the way I dress. And inherently, because of how a lot of these subcultures that were kind of on the outskirts get kind of co-opted and commercialized, what is identified as goth these days, and I've mentioned it when we were discussing this, it can boil down to really dangerous ideas of like goth is, white. It's a white aesthetic. You got to be pale, you got to have dark hair, you got to be thin, you got to look a certain way to be goth. And it doesn't matter if you listen to the music, if you support the musicians, if you represent and go and support the things that goth has always been about. It's more about these days, like what you wear. And that's really problematic because of the fact that it allows things like Dolls Kill and other clothing brands who can literally make shirts that say goth is white and think that's okay to say. We can see goths walking around wearing boy brand clothing, not realizing they're wearing a Nazi eagle blatantly on their chest. And that's why, but they don't listen to the music. They don't listen to music that talks about, the horrors of like racial discrimination or class struggle. They don't listen to any of that. They're like, I spent $100 on these really cool boots that have a skull and crossbones on it. And that's what makes me goth. And I know I'm going to pop it over to Crazy, because I know Crazy also has talked to me and Lumpy both about both these music genres quite a bit when it comes to aesthetics. So I'm sure Crazy has a lot to say about this.
Yeah, because if Nico is goth and Lumpy is the old punk, and I'm like the new punk, basically in this group, and I can't say how plugged into the current punk scene I am, but I do know a bit of like its history and things like that. And one of the main things I always want to tell people when it comes to punk is that, like, first it came from like Britain, where like the general like aesthetic and politics came from, and then when it came to the U.S., the first people to pick up punk were Black people. Like one of the earliest punk bands was Death, which is like an all Black punk band, and they are fucking awesome. And you have Bad Brains, and then you have Boneyard, you have Noise Addiction, you have all these super, super, super good Black bands, and they essentially made the sound. Like they made what a lot of people identify today as punk. And then there's another man now who I believe, I forget his name, I think it's like Wes, and he made the modern day like emo sound. He's Afro, like he's Jamaican, like his mother is Jamaican and his father is white. And he's white passing, but he is a biracial man. And a lot of people tend to forget that. And, a lot of these genres were pioneered by Black people. And the punk scene, like like Lumpy talked about it before, it does get appropriated the same exact way that goth does. And you see now on TikTok in particular, I see it a lot, where you have people there are like, I'm a conservative goth.
I'm a goth Republican who is going to get rebaptized Christian. And
I'm a punk, and I support Donald Trump because that's the real counterculture, as if he isn't the president of the fucking United States. Like, until the president becomes counterculture, hell will actually be a water park. Like, it's like no way that's going to ever happen. And really, I was thinking about this while Nico was talking. Like, it's really just the idea of an aesthetic that causes it to be so easily turned into a tool of propaganda. This idea that like to be something, you just have to look like it. And that's such a good segue into like how capitalism then tries to advertise this to you. Because one of the biggest things that capitalism does, it has the expert master ability to get its nasty little grubby little paws on everything and then sell it back to you. It can sell its own counterculture. Like there's this one quote, it's a bit intense, that goes something along the lines of like, we will hang the capitalists by the ropes that they will sell. It's like it does not care about its own demise at all. It will sell you your own counterculture. It will sell you back your own ideals. It will sell you back everything. And the way that they are able to, that like capitalism as a machine is able to take something and turn it into an aesthetic, turn it into a, just like a blanket image of something. And they can they can suck out everything. They can suck out the history. They can suck out the ideals. They can suck out even the music at that point, because then you have stuff like pop punk, because that's why it was called pop punk, because it got mainstream and it had like a more pop sound. It was meant to be like a disparaging term, and then it kind of turned into its own thing. And so you get like all that going on as well. And it completely, it is just a master at turning anything into just a hollow remake of itself. And even in, the past, I kind of like going back to pop punk, pop punk still became its own thing, and another genre that I'm tapped into, metal, specifically new metal. And the shining child example of people that don't fucking understand what this music and this culture is about is Rage Against the Machine. I think they qualify as like, punk / like new metal sort of ish. I think they're more punk and rock. And the amount of videos, the amount of times I have seen conservative, like straight up Republican Donald Trump supporting conservatives being mad at Rage Against the Machine for supporting, freeing Palestine and stuff, and being like, because one of the members literally has on his guitar "Arm the Homeless." And I'm sitting here like, bro, their name's called Rage Against the Machine. One of the people has an "Arm the Homeless" fucking like guitar. What machine do you think they were raging against? A fucking washing machine? Like, what did you think? And I've seen videos of like people at conservative rallies wearing like that thin blue line, like American version of the American flag version thing, like that's like pro police. And it was a video of this woman. She was wearing a thin blue line flag, and she was dancing around to, I kid you not, to their one song that goes, the same if you burn crosses are the same ones that work forces. I read the name of the song. She was dancing to that song wearing a thin blue line flag. Like, because it's purely about aesthetics. It's purely about appearing a certain way. Oh, the music sounds nice and angry, and I'm nice and angry. But a lot of people that tend to be very angry are either, leftists who are mad at the system, or conservatives mad that immigrants took their jobs again, or something like that, or whatever, thing they're recycled about. And it's just one of those things where it's all a part of capitalism. It's just the way that it operates. It is able to take on its own critiques onto itself and then sell it to you to help reinforce it, because that's the only way that capitalism survives. It just steals and takes and sells, and just over and over and over and over again. So yeah, it's extremely common in the music scene. I think every single genre has a history of being co-opted and turned into a right-leaning genre. If I knew it better, I think country suffered the same fate as well, but that's a different conversation.
No, I was just going to say, I think it's funny because I know you're really into new metal, but for me, like growing up, like I always saw at least what was like, up in the forefront of what new metal is. It was music for angry white boys. It was for them to be able to justify their anger. That's why it was so edgy, and they could be mad, smash stuff, and, all that. But it was no like critique on the system. Of course, like as I've gotten older, I'm still not the biggest fan, But there are bands that do, have like socially conscious music, like you mentioned Rage Against the Machine, but also, like OTEP. OTEP has a lot of like very left music, but
My
it's
favorite band
also,
of all time, System of a Down. If you listen to their lyrics and go into their interviews and hear what they're talking about, because they're Armenian, like just to
Mhm.
say it out, like they are Armenian. Of course, their family and their ancestry stuff from like the Armenian genocide and things like that. So it's like, yeah, like there's a lot of there's a lot of good shit in there.
Sadly, it seems like System of a Down has started falling to capitalism and right wing propaganda, sadly. But yes, originally System of a Down was also very blatant about, challenging the system.
Nico likes to ruin everything for me.
Oh yeah. No, I guess that's one of the things that makes me so goth is I'm good at being like, do you want some really bad news about this thing you love? Because I know.
It's okay, Nico.
I mean, if it helps, one of the things I was going to bring up, because it's one that I fell for. Um, in recent years, it's been challenged. There are a lot of really good bands that are blatantly communist or anarchist coming out of that music genre. But I was, as a teenager, even though I was goth, I was also really into black metal. And I was listening to the music without realizing that second wave black metal and like black metal coming out of France, things like that, they were very blatantly fascist. And I was a kid who listened to it because the aesthetic was cool. I liked the music, but did not realize that I had something feeding me fascist rhetoric when I was a child, like literally a child. And I appreciate that there are more musicians coming out and challenging that, but it's just another sign of like we all can fall to this aesthetic if we don't look deeper into what we're taking in.
I think also while we're on the topics of aesthetics, another good example of that's not necessarily revolving around the music scene is fashion. Fashion that comes from these aesthetics, whether it's goth fashion, whether it's punk fashion, country fashion, and things like that. Because think of country, like what's a big thing associated with country? Jeans. And guess what company is doing some fascism right now and relates to jeans? American Eagle. What I'm referencing is the I keep wanting to say Sweeney Todd, but her name is Sydney Sweeney. The Sydney Sweeney ad with American Eagle, where she's being mock interviewed technically, and on like the screen and the after you see it everywhere, it says, Sydney Sweeney has nice jeans, and it's very obvious what they're trying to say. They're trying to do a play on words between jeans as in the article of clothing and then jeans as in genetics. And, Sydney Sweeney is a white woman with blonde hair and blue eyes. I don't think I need to explain what genes they're referring to. It's like, and it's so blatant. And the thing is about it that kills me is that people will try to justify it. They're like, oh, well, obviously they're not focusing on how she looks. They're just saying she has nice genes. And then if you look up advertisements of it, they have like there's one advertisement where it literally says it. Sweeney Todd has nice jeans with a G. And it's like her walking up to it, crossing it out, and writing jeans with a J. And I'm like, why the fuck would they reference that? Like, first of all, it's right there. And plus, what do you mean she has good genes? What does that mean? Why are we talking about this about jeans? Like things that we wear on our body. And it's really how, even in advertising, like how capitalism will slowly just erode and roll on its belly and just showed it. Like, at the end of the day, fascism and the aesthetics of fashion will seep into quite literally any and everything. Like, even just wearing your clothes at this point is political. It always has been with aesthetics of, goth and punk and things like that. But now it's like even more blatant. We're like, I want to side eye any motherfucker that's wearing American Eagle now, because now American Eagle has more or less aligned itself with, or is trying to align itself with more fascist ideals, basically. And another company that's kind of becoming fash is Steak and Shake. And so what does Steak and Shake do? Steak and Shake recently has released or announced that they are going to be making their like cooking all like their fries and meat and everything in like 100% beef tallow. And the thing is about beef tallow is that it's a meat product. I think it's like animal fat, and and there's a lot of weird. It's in the manosphere, where there's a lot of emphasis on like eating meat, eating raw meat, eating fat, like getting that protein, getting that testosterone in you. You don't want to be a soy boy. You don't want to eat tofu and beans and get all that estrogen inside of you. Like it's a lot of like very weird connotations, and it's all about like masculinity, being tough, being strong. And I love the advertisements around beef tallow that Steak and Shake has been putting out has like a 1950s aesthetic to it. So it's like, what's happening here. And if you investigate the connection, you see that people like RFK, the bad RFK, had I think he was literally on a podcast with the CEO of Steak and Shake. And shortly after that podcast, shortly after they met up, they all of a sudden they want to start cooking everything with beef tallow. And it really makes people think about like your food and your consumption as politics, and how literally anything can come into it. And we should already have known food is politics with the boycott against, Starbucks, McDonald's, Wendy's, Burger King, Panda Express, I think at one point was in there. Chipotle was in there. Well, just all the people sending money to Israel in various ways and supporting them in various ways. It's like, yeah, everything you do is political. And
And I'd say like the tallow stuff and like the fit like fits into the fitness thing that the the Nazis, like especially Goring, who is like the most out of shape Nazi, is like pushed for the Nazis, like pushing this well fitness and doing what they did with the Hitler Youth and everything like that, like that whole aesthetic stuff too. So
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I've been seeing the beef tallow stuff on my TikTok a lot, for skincare and beauty products, about how it will retain your youth better than any unnatural products you're putting on your face and in your body. Which is also one of those things that, the beauty industry as a whole can fall into, this idea of what, women, the right type of woman is supposed to look like. Clear skin, all like no wrinkles, no aging. And I honestly think that that comes down to, capitalism forcing us to feel bad about ourselves, but also just, how quickly we will put whatever someone tells us to do, put on our body, if it means we'll fit the right image.
Yeah, we were talking a lot about, I was listening to all of you talk about like clothing and aesthetics and that. And I don't know if you guys have seen Taylor Swift releasing her merch. So she released a hat for men that says protect the family on it. And this is a direct reference to the Nazis and one of their like proclaimed missions. It's a white supremacist dog whistle. She also had released a necklace that had 8 of the SS lightning bolts on it, with a 8-point star as the pendant, which is a reference to Hail Hitler, the number 8 being the 8th letter of the alphabet twice. And then also the pendant itself looks to be like a medal that was awarded to people who lived outside of Germany for being good supporters of the Nazis. So there's a lot of really blatant just fascism with Taylor Swift that's been going on for well over a decade at this point. People are still trying to defend these items because that's what a good dog whistle is. It always leaves room for deniable plausibility. The hat is a lyric from her song. And then in one of her songs, she references lightning bolts. But when you go on the website to purchase this necklace, lightning is intentionally spelled the wrong way. So it's not spelled like lightning, it's spelled like lightening bolt, as in like lightning something. So there's another very obvious. At this point, I don't even know if it is a dog whistle. At this point, it's just Nazi stuff. And they're trying to say, well, it's because she talks about it in a song. But the song, she talks about her fiance's last relationship, who was with a Black woman. And she refers to his last relationship as being sleepless nights in Onyx. And then now he meets Taylor, and there was lightning, and now the sky is opalite, which is like a white gemstone. So it's just all across the board, totally and completely Nazi stuff. And then along with this, she released a kit to make a clock out of her last 4 albums. And when you put these albums together in order, the back of this clock forms a swastika. And there are people who are still trying to say this is an accident, this is an accident. And many designers have come out and said that there's absolutely no way in hell that something like this could ever be an accident. There are multiple levels of designers that would have to go through to get cleared. You're supposed to be looking at everything from every possible angle. But I'm not surprised. And the reason that I'm not surprised is because Taylor Swift has always been the darling of the alt-right. She was propped up on 4chan. They would make like references to her, like they put up her picture and do like Hitler quotes on her picture. They called her, all kinds of things that I'm not going to repeat. And really bolstered her up as this, America's sweetheart type thing. And this was brought to her attention, and it took her, I want to say, 2.5 years to publicly denounce the alt-right. She had been asked multiple times to do this. But all the way back in 2009, there's a photo of her with her arm around a man who has a swastika on his shirt. So I think that Taylor Swift is a very good example of pipelines, and like her fans, maybe some of them didn't know this history. Yeah, there's the picture. But she's gotten away with a lot to the point where now it just couldn't be any more obvious, and people are continuing to support her because we have really gotten to a point currently where you can just be an open Nazi and absolutely nothing will happen to you. I mean, like, look at, Charlie Kirk, Nick Fuentes, like there are no repercussions for this. They feel totally and completely safe to spread their messaging. And then all of her songs are just completely full of microaggressions towards Black women, and then continuously referencing the nuclear family. So it's really, and it's on the radio. It's just being played all over the radio where kids can hear it, and parents allow it. So
Yeah. There's also 14 links
yes.
between the lightning bolts. Was another thing that people discovered. They're saying that there's 12, but I don't know if that came out after. Like the picture shows the 8. And they're like, oh no, there's 12 lightning bolts. Don't fear. But like the lightning bolts, the SIG, the whole the Germany using like the fake ruins that they used anyways, and the Viking culture and all that stuff is just so bad. And yeah, I mean, you can sit there and go, all right, so there's the example of the woman who started a business with the things that hook, like she's a mountain climber, and she called it like a slur that would be Mexican, but it's a carabiner, so she called it the last part of that word, and she honestly made a mistake, and she came out and she apologized. So like, why defend something? Why, if people are seeing it in a way, in the light that it is a dog whistle, and people are seeing it and like, I don't like this, you shouldn't use this, and it's happening more than once, you would have some, kind of sensitivity person like to look at this stuff before it came out. You wouldn't have everyone just defend you and you just ignore it and be like, no, that's not what I meant.
Yeah. I mean, I was going to say, I think one of the things that a lot of people, I mean, I'm sure everyone here knows, but Taylor kind of set this up in a way for there to be plausible deniability because of the fact that her fans take everything she writes, everything she puts out media wise. There's a secret message underneath. There's something in between the lines. And the fact is becoming more blatant. It can be seen as like, well, that's not what she actually means. You got to read the subtext. But it's like, no, actually, the subtext was the issue. It's always been there. It's just becoming more blatant. And it's really important that if you're like a Taylor Swift fan right now, to realize that you have fallen for propaganda in a very real way. You've been told to look for the secret meeting, those dog whistles that are supposed to be hidden enough that that other people don't know it, but you know it. And I think that's super, super dangerous. That's what she's done.
No, 100%. And I don't know if you saw, so she actually did address these allegations a couple of days ago, except for what she said is that she invites the chaos. So she's making no apology, no excuse, nothing for it at all. And a lot of her fans are trying to say that she's not on the alt-right because she quote unquote beefed with Trump, which isn't actually really true. Like Trump very personally congratulated her on her recent engagement and said that she was like wonderful and he liked her so much. And the reason that they're saying this is because at the last minute of the election, she came out and endorsed Kamala Harris. So they're all trying to say, well, she endorsed Kamala Harris. Therefore, all of these, SS lightning bolts and swastikas and all that is just, we're all just misunderstanding Taylor. But this has been going on for so long. So her personal dress designer, I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but she's the one that makes her dresses and has for many years, has been called out multiple times for cultural appropriation. And she very specifically had a line of dresses that she called the plantation line of clothing. They had a photo shoot at a plantation with these dresses and were trying to sell them. She was trying to sell a plantation aesthetic. And this is the person that has been making Taylor's dresses for many, many years. None of this is an accident whatsoever. And I honestly could go on and on. So I'll stop here, but there's just, I can't even tell you, there's just so much.
Yeah, I mean, it gets to a point where it, it's not a mistake. It's not a mistake, you know?
No,
So,
I mean,
And a lot of
thank you.
these, uh, fashion things, it reminded me of two things. Especially when we were talking about the designer Ash, it reminded me of how like the Nazis, like they had a very distinct look, right? Like their uniform. It was very distinct. But one thing about the uniform that always got me when it came to so many different things was how like clean their uniform was, like how tailored everything was, how thought out everything was. Like there was one time I found like a Nazi like catalog of the different uniforms, and they had like every single thing, like down to like the medals that they had. They had planned out to, like the last thread, to the last design. And it always got me how, like fascism isn't just this thing that just like keeps popping up everywhere because it's chaotic. It's a planned thing. It's a planned movement. And the person that designed the Nazi uniform, his name was Hugo Boss. Like that Hugo Boss. Like he was a very well known luxury brand designer. And it's also one of the reasons why I stopped wearing Doc Martens, because Doc Martens was designed by a quite literal, straight up SS um, World War II soldier. He designed them because he kept like twisting his ankle or something, so he just designed the shoe, and that's what we have today as Doc Martens. And I'm just like, no, thank you, don't want that, absolutely not. And so again, it's one of those things where the history, like the actual, like just the literal history of fashion with Nazism is very, very, very hand in hand. It is very, very, in line. And there's other cases where, like, during the Nazi rise to power, they appropriated film, art. They had, like, because they were appropriating different aspects of socialism. So they had, like, actors, associations and to the Nazi party. They had painters associated to the Nazi party. They had musicians associated with them. People like Goebbels worked a lot, very, very closely with these people all the time. And so it's like aesthetics and appropriating different forms of art and different forms of expression has always, always, always been a part of the Nazi playbook. And it's always been a part of the fascist playbook as well. And that's why, when people think about this, like, some people like sit back and go, okay, like, is there a chance that you guys are just seeing way too much into all of this and you're just doing too much? Like, what if it was really all just an accident? It's like, there's too much that goes into it for it to be an accident. Like, that's the entire point, because it's stochastic terrorism. That's what people like Charlie Kirk did. They would say these things that had plausible deniability, but it was filled with dogmas. So the ones that picked up on it, and the ones that didn't, and that was it. Until what happened to him. He advocated for the very thing that he suffered from. Like, like these things have a very real effect. These things have a very real, consequences to the lives of the people that it targets, the lives of the people around them that it targets, and even, as we see with Charlie Kirk, the very people that spout that nonsense themselves. The system did not protect Charlie Kirk. It didn't at all. He's dead just like everyone else has been killed by fascism.
Yeah, I wanted to bring up like the Richard Spencer of it too, the Dapper. When they went into this Dapper, and the Proud Boys would wear those what are they, Fred Perry shirts, Frank Perry, I can't remember what the designer is, but it's a polo shirt. And the designer wasn't happy about that, though Hugo Boss was perfectly fine with outfitting the Nazis. But, some people get, I don't want you, using my brand. But like that whole thing, when they were coming out with Richard Spencer, this dapper man of the alt-right, and the alt-right dresses in this dapper way. And this was like 10 years ago. And that's speaking to the youth. You're saying, like, you dress up all this nice way, and you too could be alt right, and all you have to do is hate everything or everyone.
Yeah. No, I mean, this talking about, Sydney Sweeney and then Taylor Swift kind of made me think about, and even talking about how the Nazis, like, fine-tuned the aesthetics of what their messaging was. It makes me think about how we're seeing it happen here. There's like Taylor Swift and Sydney Sweeney both represent this idea of what an American woman is supposed to be. And it is following the same kind of trend that we see with Nazis. You know, blonde hair, blue-eyed, fragile looking, not, innocent, and that they need help. They're the woman that, needs to be saved from everybody else. And even in spaces where people supposedly are on the left, we see the dangers of kind of falling for the American aesthetic. And I'm sure everyone here knows what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the ACP. What we're talking about today directly reflects the idea of why it is so dangerous to fall for the aesthetics of patriotism, American patriotism, and the idea of what a working class person is. The fact that it's, for blatantly the ACP, a white man, like let's be honest, a white man who works at a factory. They're focused on those type of people. They're focused on the American flag. They're focused on the farm worker and the trucker, just like the right wing is, just like the fascists are here, because that is that's who they're trying to talk to. And when I think about these things, when people are just like, they're not that bad, they just really like America. I'm like, yeah, because America's fascist. Those aesthetics are all dog whistles to tell you what America's supposed to be, which is a settler colony based on white supremacy. And when I see people like Taylor Swift and Sydney Sweeney being blatant about this type of ideals, and then turn around and have someone go, well, I'm a communist, but I support the ACP. You're falling for the same dog whistles. Just they're being told to you by a man who has a misunderstanding Marx.
I know I might be being a bit mean, but it's not a misunderstanding of Marx. It's a blatant twisting of Marx's. It started with Mao and then they went to Marx and everything. If you read any of the stuff that they quote or try to cite them on anything that they say, you read like the quotes in context and like the full text. Never, at no point have I ever seen them quote anything that when in the context doesn't say the complete opposite. Like the whole Mao would want us to be a landlord. Brother, do I have to tell you what Mao did to landlords? Mao and landlords. Okay, sure, fine. Just go on with that. Even people that aren't communists know Mao's opinions on landlords. Like, it's just so like it's part of it is fascinating and the other part of it is like deeply terrifying because it's like, we've been through this before. Like not like us, but like we have been through this before, and it's not even like that long ago in human history. Like this was just the early 1900s, right? Like this is like this is not something that we don't know. Like you can go back and find direct parallels with Nazi fascism, aesthetics, fashion, with what's happening now today. It's one of those things where I wonder, like, why is it that the Volkswagen is still a thing? Do you guys know what the Volkswagen is from?
Yeah. It's
Hitler designed the Volkswagen. Like he personally sat down with automotive engineers and designed it. Volkswagen is German for people's wagon. Like, how the fuck is that company still around? It was made by Hitler. Like, there's no companies or state-owned companies at least that was in the Soviet Union that are still around. They don't make anything from there anymore. All their factories got shut down. All their products got thrown in the trash. Even though we know today they are still in good use. The only thing that's still in use that was made by the Soviet Union is the AK. And like that's it. That's like instruments of war and guns, basically. That's the only thing that they still make because war is, profitable under capitalism. It's like, it's just one of those things where we realize how ever present this other stuff is and how history is still very much alive and is still very much touching us to this day, and how it's reviving itself all over again. This is one of those things where it's like at a certain point you have to ask yourself, like, how loud do the dog whistles have to get before they're just deafening? Right? Like, how loud do they get before they just become an alarm? And by then it's already too late.
I actually wanted to ask Nico what they think about people who say we can Uno reverse the co-optation.
I think that's ridiculous. That, as Ash is talking about, there is something I've been seeing a lot on TikTok. I've been seeing people who call themselves communists and liberationists who think it is okay to meme with fascist aesthetic. And that is something called red shambhala. When I first saw it, I was just like, what the hell is this? So I did some research. I did some looking into it. And the main book that this information is from someone who, from everything I know, worked like for the government, like for a Western government, who wrote about how the Soviets used a term, red shambhala, which is a Tibetan and Mongolian like portion of a spiritual practice for them, where they utilize that kind of religion portion to convince them to join the Soviet side, which, if true, is gross in the way that you shouldn't be using someone's cultural practices to, influence them in a certain way. You should be talking to them about their material conditions and what they need for their own liberation. But these people on TikTok have been using Red Shambhala to represent basically the counter to Argartha, which Argartha is a Nazi kind of esoteric heaven-like world. So when people mention Red Shambhala, they've made their own red sun, which disgustingly is a bunch of scythes that make a black sun. And then they use blatant Nazi aesthetics, like blonde-haired, blue-eyed white people, countrysides, cottages. They literally have pictures that say "Hell Stalin." And they think it's funny. They think it's a meme that will make the Nazis upset and that we can all have a good laugh. But all I see when people post that is they are enforcing the ideals and aesthetics of Nazis. It tells me that for some reason it's okay for you to push something that someone who doesn't know what it is can look at it and go, oh, communists think it's okay that we should have a world where it's only blonde-haired, blue-eyed people. It's okay to say "Hell Stalin." It's okay to post and walk around with a black sun version, a communist version of a black sun. There's no joking about Nazism or fascism as a meme. It's always harmful. And the fact that some people think it's okay to do as a joke and that we're going to sit there and let them sit there and do it, like, no, I'm sorry, you're going to get pushback. I already have a lot of people on TikTok who are mad at me because every time it seems like to be a trend where they'll go into someone's live and they'll just be like, "Red Shambhala?" ? And I'm like, it's fucking gross. Stop it. Are you 15 years old? Grow up. Sorry.
Well, even in the in the punk thing, when you get into, Sid Vicious wearing a swastika and Vivienne Westwood saying, "Oh, we're going to use this, because we're like, F our parents who fought them," you know what I mean? Like, oh, so we're just, using as anti-authority when like that was like the ultimate authority, you know what I mean? Like that was like not a good thing at all. You can't, I think too, like on like Mel Brooks, like even in the 70s, early 80s, trying to do like a lot of the a lot of Jewish comedians would do a lot of like poking fun, mocking Hitler and stuff like that. But what did that get? That kept that in the cult, like kept it in the culture. And I don't know, like yeah, I go around laughing at Nazis, just I find them funny, but they're not funny either, too. You know what I mean? Like, so, like trying to, like even what Sharp was doing with the skinhead stuff, it was never going to go back to being what it was. It was never going, they weren't going to fight that because you still have, people trying to fight it saying like, I'm in Sharp. And then you still have the skinheads that show up all the time. So I don't know.
Yeah, no,
I don't think
for me, it feels like you are simply signaling, excuse me, to Fash that you are a communist that is willing to talk. You're willing to talk to them because you think their aesthetic is either harmless or funny. So why are you signaling that to Fash people? Yeah, hopefully there are people who are young that are fascists that can learn, but in general, we know what needs to happen to Fash. And it's not talking. And it's definitely not giving them signals that somehow communism will be understanding.
No, 100%, 100%. And there's overlap, I noticed, between the Red Shambhala people and the ACP people. I often do see them together. And then there was an instance where a panel had like a couple Red Shambhala profiles up and a few of the ACP ones. And then it was later found out a few days ago that all of them are in a white supremacist, actual like Nazi debate server. I'm not going to say the guy's name on here because I don't want to put us in danger or anything. But in a lot of ways, the Red Shambhala is not only just doing what all you are saying, which it 100% is. It is totally signaling to fascists that they are safe here. And it's also reinforcing the myth of horseshoe theory to liberals. Like, how often do we have to tell liberals every single day, like, we are not fascists, we do not believe in fascism, we oppose it, and then like here you are doing like fascist aesthetics and like connecting us to that. Like, I didn't consent to being attached to a Nazi aesthetic. Sorry, I got a little bit off track, but the ACP and the Red Shambhala stuff, just from what I have seen, doesn't seem to be separate issues.
Yeah, and like this is the first time I've hearing of Red Shambhala, and just hearing about it, it's just so dumb on its face because using Nazi aesthetics and Nazi symbols just legitimizes the Nazi movement. Like that's how they get their power. The more and more people that use it, the more and more people that are open and making it comfortable to see these things and do these things, like they're just going to take that and run you right over. They don't care. Like Nazis don't debate. That's like their whole thing. And it reminds me of that one meme. It's like a comic panel of like Batman breaking a gun, and he's like, "This is a tool of the enemy. We don't use this. We don't need it." It's like how I feel when I see them using, or I never saw it, but like hearing of Nico telling us that they're using swastikas, black suns, all these different things. It's like we don't need that. First of all, we already have our own stuff that's been working for literally over 100 years at this point. It's fine. The hammer and sickle is still way cooler, and it's still just fine. But then also it's like, again, it's turning it into an aesthetic, taking all of its, history, all of its ideology out of it. And they think, oh, let me put some angular stuff on here and let me just, be cool. And it's like, it's not cool. It was never cool. Design wise, it's already crap. Like it's, and then also the history of how the swastika is an appropriated symbol from Buddhist movements, and you're just adding to the harm of that as well. And it's just like, we don't need these things. We don't need these things. It does not empower us. It does not give us an edge. It doesn't make us, making communists seem edgy is not good. It alienates us from the masses, who are the people that we are supposed to be trying to, be in contact with. Because, if you see someone that's like, I'm a communist, and they're walking around with a swastika on their shirt, or red Shambhala BS hailing Stalin, they're not going to want to talk to you, bro. Like, they just don't. Like, they will not talk to you at all. And like Ashton is just going to legitimize the whole horseshoe theory. It's like, oh, it looks like the fascists and the communists are going to shoot me dead in the street. Well, might as well go be a liberal or an anarchist or a social democrat or a Trotskyist, or, it doesn't help anything, and it doesn't help anyone. Just stop it. It's not cool. And if you want to flash up any symbols, again, we already have one. It's right there, brother. It's right there, brother.
Is there anything anyone else would like to say before we get going? I thought that this was a really great conversation, and everybody had so many amazing things to add. Would anyone like to, does anyone have closing remarks?
I just wanted to mention with the ACP stuff, with their patriotism stuff, and with next year coming up, it's going to be pretty ugly. So I would, we need to probably counter that stuff big time with the, their claim that, patriotism is fine, and it's not for the United States.
I would say for me, when it comes to wrapping up, I would say that there is an importance in realizing that propaganda doesn't just come from basically what we hear and what we read and the information we take in. A lot of it is visual. As someone who has a background in art studies, it's on a subconscious level. There's reasons why colors are chosen. There's a reason why symbols look the way they do. It all is to kind of hit on something that is subconsciously a part of you. And more people need to be aware that it's not always going to be just as simply, it's this way because it's this way. It's intentional. Nothing is just as simple as aesthetics. Nothing is just simple as simply, this is how it looks. And a lot of us need to be aware of that.
Yeah, basically, kind of piggyback off of what Nico said. Something that I'm pretty sure you've heard before, and you will keep hearing it because it's true. Everything is political. There is not a single thing. I hate to quote Kamala Harris on anything, but she cooked when she said that you do not fall far from the coconut tree at all. Because before that, she said things like, you like, nothing exists in silos. They don't exist just one after the other. These things are not just exist, but they're not like think of it as like pillars, like columns holding up a roof. Like, yeah, one stands on its own, but they all uphold a overall system. And even just breaking one can throw off the structure of all the other ones. Like, it's quite literally all connected. Everything is political. What you read is political. What you write is political. What you listen to is political. Who you listen to is political. Who you talk to is political. The spaces you hang out is political. The food you eat is political. The clothes you wear is political. Every last thing is political. It always has been and always will be. And basically, just stay vigilant. Just think about these things. Always question why someone did this. I know media literacy and reading comprehension has not been the strongest with these coming generations, unfortunately. I said as Gen Z, I'm telling you right now, it's falling by the minute. To, get the first step in, always ask why. Why was this arranged the way it was? Why are these lyrics the way that they are? Why is this closing the way that it is? Don't just sit there and let it pass you by and just enter your brain unassumed. Like, why? Question everything, literally, because everything is political.
I just want to quickly add, it's not just your generation. That is Gen X, definitely. I'm sure the boomers too. So It's a
It's a long time coming, is what it sounds like.
yeah. It just keeps going. Like we're not switching it. So
Well, I hope everybody has a wonderful night. Thank you to everybody who tuned in and watched us. I hope that you will give us a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. Bye.
bye.
Bye.